For the latest in strategic affairs, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click the bell icon for updates.
Hello and welcome to StratNews Global. I'm Nitin Gokhale. The second edition of my new weekly program, Ask Nitin, is here for you. And as announced earlier, the topic of discussion is the Kargil conflict of the summer of 1999 between India and Pakistan. Next week, that is on 26th of July, the nation will celebrate India's victory in Kargil. A hard-fought victory, if I must say, after almost 2.5 months of battle on the high peaks of Kargil, Drass, Batalik and the Mashko Valley, Turtuk subsector in the areas of what then was entire Jammu and Kashmir, but now of course falls in the Union Territory of Ladakh. So what exactly happened in 1999 is the question, and what were the implications, how India won the war, and what is the fallout in the long term for the dynamic between India and Pakistan as far as security of the border area is concerned, is the topic of Ask Nitin. So, just to briefly recap what happened exactly in 99 was that in last week of May, there was an indication that Pakistan may have sent a mix of irregulars, jihadis and soldiers into the territories which India held as far as the line of control between India and Pakistan is concerned in the Kargil, Turtuk, Batalik and Mashko subsectors, and the patrol that went first to find out or try to find out what exactly had happened, how many people had come in. The Indian patrol of 4 Jat unit was ambushed. Captain Saurav Kalia was in fact the leading that patrol. They were captured when they ran out of ammunition. They were tortured and their bodies returned with very severe torture marks. But since then, there have been many reports about what went wrong in Kargil, what could have been, and how India fought valiantly back with the brave men and officers of various units until 26 July when Pakistan had to withdraw and India could declare victory. But the cost was very high. Over 527 servicemen made their supreme sacrifice in Kargil. Several hundreds of others were injured, and India, of course, had to go through very tense moments. Fortunately for us today, we have Major General Suresh Mohanty, who was a young major based in Drass. In fact, he was what is called the Brigade Major of the 56th Brigade based in Drass. I happened to have gone to Kargil in the first week of June to report on the war on behalf of Outlook magazine. And of course, both of us have different memories of the war. He was a participant, I was an observer. But before I go further, and we discuss other things, I first want to go across to Major General S.C. Mohanty, who just recently retired from the army after a long and distinguished career and is now the security advisor to the government of Arunachal Pradesh based in Itanagar. General Mohanty, welcome to this program, and I think it's the first time you are speaking on camera about your experience in Kargil, if I am not mistaken.
Yes, Nitin, firstly, thank you very much for getting me on the show. It's a real pleasure. I've been following your channel and following your website very, very regularly. And second, also get well very, very soon. I heard that you had some injury and all. It's a very, very nostalgic moment for me when you reminded me of the Kargil war this morning.
Yes, in fact, so tell me, what is your most abiding memory of that tenure as the young Brigade Major? And Brigade Major, for the viewers, uninitiated, non-military viewers, is the fulcrum around which the brigade revolves. He is the link man between the brigade commander, that time Brigadier Amar All, and several units. I am not sure whether there were only 3 mandated battalions working under 56 Brigade that time. There could be more, but Brigade Major is the main man who is the link man. So, what is your abiding memory of those 2-3 months in Drass that you spent as a Brigade Major?
Yeah, Nitin, initially our brigade was located in the valley. In fact, we were in a place called Usang, which is just north of Gandarbal, and we were involved in CI operations in the valley. And when these intrusions were detected, we were told to move into the area of Drass, which was initially the battalion headquarters of 16 Grenadiers. And this was sometime in the second week of May. We took over the area from 121 Mountain Brigade, which was at that time, Nitin was holding a frontage of roughly 160 kilometers. That is from Koval Gully to till Chorbatla, a frontage of roughly 160, like I said, and it was just about 5 to 6 battalions which are holding the entire frontage. And once we went there, the extent of intrusion by the so-called irregulars, they're actually part of the Pakistan Northern Light Infantry, and extent of intrusion was not known exactly. So we progressively got to know the extent of intrusion about the entire frontage of roughly 160 to close to 200 kilometers. And during the entire operation, there were two most defining moments actually. First was the capture of Tololing, because Tololing feature was the one that was dominating the NH1 very, very intimately. That is the place from where, in fact, our brigade headquarters was located at Drass. And if you're sitting on Tololing feature, you could actually drop a bomb inside your teacup at Drass, where we are sitting. So capture of the first objective was by the most defining moment as far as my knowledge and my memory is concerned. And it took quite an effort. Initially, we launched operations without sufficient information about the Tololing feature as such. And we brought in a lot of artillery to punish the objective before we finally captured it. If I can tell you that the initial operations to capture Toroling was launched sometime on 22nd of May, and it was finally captured on 13th of June by 2 Rajrif.
That's right. There was also 18 grenadiers were also involved in that, and there were other units were involved in that, if I remember correctly from my reporting days.
That's right, Nitin. The first operations on Toroling was actually launched by 18 grenadiers. In fact, they had a major role to play in the success of 2 Rajrif, which finally captured it, because they were the ones who provide the firm base. The firm base is the place from where you launch your troops for attack. So they provided the firm base for final assault on Tololing feature. And let me just confide with you that that roughly about 109 guns firing on Tololing feature finally when we captured it. Generally, for a platoon defended locality, is about 7 to 8 fire units are required, and 7 to 5 units roughly about 18 to 19 guns firing. But on that particular feature, we had about 106, 100 to 9 guns firing on the objective.
So, which means the artillery played a very major role, but also it shows that how higher ground can be defended by a small force. As the Pakistanis had already come into the higher ground, it was very difficult for the Indian forces, right, to go up the slope and try and recapture that.
Yes, yes. It was a steep slope and very difficult to capture that feature. In fact, if you recollect, the initial attack which was launched, this Major Adhikari, who was part of 18 Grenadiers, in fact, he is a mechanized infantry officer in attachment with 18 Grenadiers. The initial attack, when we could not succeed, his body kept lying there till the final objective was captured, because we could not retrieve that body because of being dominated by enemy fire from the Tololing feature. So that was the difficulty under which this attack was finally launched on that objective.
So you had said that Tololing was one defining moment. What was the other defining moment?
The other defining moment is also the point 5140, where remember Vikram Batra was part of the unit which captured that objective. And of course, the Tiger Hill, which was finally captured with a lot of air support. In the initial part of the operation, the Air Force was not utilized as far as the Tololing feature was concerned because of a variety of reasons which we can discuss. But when Tiger Hill was captured, it was the Air Force also played a very major role by utilizing the laser-guided bombs on the feature. So the distinct, phases of the operations to start with was Tololing and thereafter 5140 and the Tiger Hill. Of course, I'm focusing on
That's
the operation which was launched in the Drass sector. There are similar kind of operations launched in the Batalik area and the other in the Chorbatla area, Kaksar and Batalik. So those, since I was not there, it's only the knowledge from the literature that I can say. But otherwise, I was personally there in Drass. And like you mentioned, we moved in with 3 battalions, but we had as many as 9 battalions under command when the operations were being launched.
so imagine your plight. I can imagine your plight that time as a young brigade major to liaise and coordinate with 9 battalions must have been quite a 24/7 task. Really, was that so?
Yes. What was happening is that we were not launching multiple battalions at the same time. Since Drass was a firm base, the units were being launched on sequentially on the operations. So you at any point in time about 2 to 3 battalions being launched. You didn't have 9 battalions being launched at the same time. So it was not such a difficult task to control those battalions during the actual when the actual fight was on.
True, but one more additional responsibility I think the Drass Brigade had was the hordes of media people descending on the Drass Brigade. I remember being at the gate constantly where there was a PCO, STD PCO, where soldiers used to make calls and we also used to then sneak in to make calls from there. That must have been an additional responsibility and some point of tension for the brigade that time.
Absolutely right, Nitin. But I was not involved directly in the media part of it, which the deputy commander.
Colonel S.V. David was doing. Yes, I remember. I remember him particularly because he was from my college, many years senior to me from Pune, Wadia College. But he was the one who was handling the media. And I remember maybe 50, 60 of us constantly descending on the brigade headquarters. And it's no wonder I didn't meet you there that time because you were on the backroom operations really.
No, there were a lot of media people who were trying to intrude into my office because, like you said, it was a 24/7 work that I had. In fact, we slept for just about maybe 1 or 2 hours of disturbed sleep every day. That continued nearly for 7 to 8 days at one time, then maybe a break for a day, a thing like that. But I did meet, if you remember, Rudranath Sanyal was from the
From Doordarshan.
from Doordarshan. He
Doordarshan
was
that
there.
time.
I've
Doordarshan.
interacted with
Yes.
him. And then Barkhadat was there, and that's the famous. I'm speaking from the bunker.
Yes, Vikram Batra sitting there and yeah, many of those people, yes.
Did have certain interaction with the media as well, but I was not the one directly dealing with the media since I was, hands full with my operational duties.
True. Let me come to the more serious part of this operation. And before we take some questions from our viewers, which you will perhaps need to be answering apart from me, giving some clarifications. Two things. Questions have always dogged people and people have always raised these questions. There was a controversy. I was part of that controversy in Outlook magazine, you will remember, about advance warnings of these intrusions and the delay or the number of casualties India suffered because of restrictions placed by the government. So, what is your memory from that time? These two questions about advance warnings being there, which were ignored or which were not taken very seriously, and could we have avoided so many casualties?
Yeah, first talking about the advanced warning itself, we didn't have that kind of surveillance equipment to be able to undertake extensive surveillance over the 160 kilometers I was talking about, being held by one brigade. It is physically impossible to hold each and every point on a frontage of 160 kilometers. So therefore, we have to rely on surveillance to a very great extent. And surveillance is not physical surveillance; is also electronic surveillance, which has to uh, be backed up by certain areas where you can carry out physical surveillance. So that was something where probably we didn't have adequate resources at that point in time. So therefore, we had inadequate surveillance, and therefore, when the intrusion took place, it is progressively during the operations that we came to know as to what was the total extent of the intrusion that had taken place. And due to paucity of resources, there were some of the winter vacated posts into which these intrusions had taken place, and that is the posts which are vacated during winters, and they are reoccupied during summers. So these posts which are vacated during winters were maybe in the process of being reoccupied, and that's the advantage that the enemy took to occupy those posts. And since we didn't have adequate surveillance, we didn't have adequate resources for carrying out, the winter reconnaissance, which is called Vaso sorties by Hepters. That also was not, adequate resources were not available. So that was the reason as to why some of the intrusions, in fact, most of the intrusions were not detected in time.
Right. And about the casualties then?
Yeah, yes. So the casualty was most of the operations in high altitude. What you do is you first put a block behind the enemy. You try to cut him off, and then try to pound him with artillery, and thereafter capture the objective. That's the process in which you carry out attacks on the high altitudes. But in this case, since the restrictions were not to cross the line of control, many of the operations had to be actually launched frontally. And being in a higher ground with automatic weapons, in fact, the Pakistani Northern Light Infantry has more number of automatics than the number of people who are there. So if you take it proportionally, the number of automatics that we have generally at subunit level and sub-subunit level. So he had large number of automatics. So therefore, he could bring down fire from a higher altitude to a lower altitude. You had to climb the features to assault an objective, and therefore these casualty took place during the fire and assault. In addition to that, there are a lot of casualties, the firm bases and the assembly areas and things like that by the artillery that he utilized, especially the 120 millimeter mortars that he very effectively utilized. Because I remember at Drass when we were there were a lot of firing that took place on us. I mean, every time. I mean, when we are moving out for lunch, we are in our ops room, or we are trying to evacuate casualties from that helipad. The helicopter actually never stopped their rotors. They were actually their engines on, the rotor is on. We were trying to push the casualties into the helicopters, and they used to just land for about 1-2 minutes and then take off to Mataya, the place where the field hospital was there.
True, but there was also, I know, I can understand that. There was also no tree cover, no forest cover in that topography. That would have been a limiting factor.
Absolutely, absolutely. There was in that area there is actually no vegetation. Like I said, you can just pick and choose to sit on top of, let's say, Tiger Hill. Tiger Hill was a little further behind, a lot of distance. So you to point at targets and all, designate targets would be a little more difficult than Tololing. So you sit on top of Tololing, you can designate targets at Drass, each and every building actually. So therefore, in the first couple of days, sorry.
Yes. Yeah. Go ahead.
So in the first couple of days, he could pick and choose each and every shed that he wants to engage at Drass. In fact, the first shed that to go up in flames was the mandir, and where a lot of tents were there, the mandir went up in flames. The second was, of course, the officers' mess, when you had a lot of sharpness coming into the dining space.
Right. So that was the reason. But let's look at widen this discussion a little bit, and from the viewers, some questions will come to us now. I think I have a viewer joining us from Bangalore, one Mr. Tarun Hukku. If I can have that question, then the general can actually hear that question, and then both of us can answer it one by one.
Thank you so much for having me, Nitin. Uh, my question stems from a visit I had made to Kargil a few years ago, and I was at the war memorial, and one of the servicemen there was explaining the battle to me. And when I looked up on Tiger Hill, I realized that it was a stupendous task that the forces had undertaken. But at the same time, the question was that given the amount of lives we lost, was there any technology or weapons that we could have had at that time which would have helped save some of these lives? And if not, then do we have those capabilities now? Should such a incident reoccur? This has been on top of my mind because I did some more of the memorials and all, and this is what kept coming into my mind, that the loss of lives was quite substantial, and we should avoid it if possible in the future.
Sure, it's a great question, General Mohanty. I think you've answered it partially, but as a viewer and as somebody who's a civilian, I think his observation is absolutely bang on.
Absolutely, I agree with him 100%. Even to a person in uniform or a person who just retired from the army, it's still date. It pinches me the number of casualties that we had. And when we learn about how to launch operation in the high altitude area or in mountainous terrain, it is not the frontal assault that we launch. It is you first cut the enemy off from the rear, and then you pound him with the firepower resources, and only then you just walk in and carry out mopping up by the infantry. But there was some restrictions with regard to the amount of fire units that were available at that point in time. There were restrictions with regard to crossing over the LSC and try to cut him off. And third, there was also problem of cutting across the enemy from the rear at multiple number of places. It was some places were actually inaccessible, and because
Right.
the approaches that he had utilized to come and occupy these features were the ones that he was dominating. So when you try and get across, get behind him, you have to find another approaches, and those approaches were actually not available at many places.
So his second part of his question is also important. That time, of course, the surveillance equipment was quite inadequate, or maybe primitive, not in adequate numbers. Also, the restrictions you mentioned about not crossing the LOC. But now, after you've rose to become a senior officer in the army. What is the situation now? If this was to reoccur, how would we deal with it?
I think we're far better off in terms of surveillance equipment, whether it is in terms of the UAVs, the HAHO, and the air resources, the satellite imageries, the P8I of the Navy. We do have a lot of additional resources in terms of surveillance, both in ground surveillance, electronic surveillance, and the surveillance resources available with the Air Force and the Navy. So we get a much better picture and much intimate picture of the area where we are holding than what we had at that point in time. And we did have certain restrictions, and you very clearly remember what the then chief of the army staff
Prime
advised,
Minister.
we will fight with
Yeah.
what we have. So,
That's right.
that time we had this thing. We don't have that kind of a problem in terms of surveillance as of today. The second
That's
issue
good to
Nitin
know. I
just
think,
wanted to highlight.
yes.
Sorry.
Yeah, sure. Go
The
ahead.
second
Go
issue,
ahead.
the second issue I have to highlight is that the other way could have been, when the enemy has come in certain numbers at a particular place, we could have opened up the plain sector, we could have opened up the desert sector, where we had far better, military asymmetry vis-a-vis Pakistan. We could have just walked in and taken a couple of kilometers into the enemy territory without firing many shots, if I can put it that way, because of my knowledge of that area.
Yes. True.
But we did not do it. I mean that's a decision that was taken at the highest level. And why we got the entire international support in support of our operations in Operation Vijay is because we did not cross the LSC, and we did display a very high degree of restraint in not expanding the areas of conflict. So
True.
yes, in retrospect, probably we could have fought in a different way, and if that
And
happens today,
avoided so many casualties. But yes, exactly. The circumstances were different, like you were saying.
And also, I mean, if the similar situation occurs today, probably we'll fight it entirely differently, Nitin. I mean, it's not going to be the same way they're going to fight it.
Absolutely. No, that's what progress means. And after 23 years, I think that's something we should be proud of. So, Tarun, there's your answer in detail by somebody who was there on the ground and who was part of the operation intimately. We will take more questions. We have two more, I think, ladies joining us, surprisingly. And we will take those questions one by one. So we have Shivani joining us, and she has a question. Just give a brief introduction of yourself and then ask the question, Shivani. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. So my name is Shivani Pandita and I'm from Jammu and Kashmir. I've done my bachelor's from Miranda House. So my question of the day is, even though Lahore Declaration was held, why did Kargil War still happen? And was it any kind of failure on the part of Indian Army that they did not see it coming, the Pakistan troops making their way deep inside the LOC?
Great. I think you've asked a very historical question because of the Lahore Declaration. For those of you who don't know what the Lahore Declaration she's talking about, was the kind of agreement between India and Pakistan by Prime Ministers Atal Bihari Vajpayee and Nawaz Sharif of Pakistan that time, where India and Pakistan had decided to enforce peace and have more dialogue and try and have peace between the two nations. But within 4 or 5 months of that declaration in early 1999, Pakistanis intruded into these areas, and of course they had designs. So before I go to General Mohanty, my own understanding of the Pakistani approach or Pakistani operation in Kargil was that the Pakistanis wanted to cut off Siachen, which they had failed to dislodge India from. The operation in Siachen had taken place in 1984, and for 15 years Pakistan tried to recapture Siachen or dislodge India from Siachen glacier and from the peaks there on the Saltoro Ridge. When that did not happen, General Musharraf, who was by then the army chief of Pakistan at that time during Kargil, he wanted to take revenge on the failure to take Siachen, and he wanted to cut off Siachen and Ladakh or Leh from rest of the country, rest of Jammu and Kashmir, and that is why he launched this operation, is what my understanding is. And of course, you've heard General Mohanty giving the reasons, so we'll not get into that. That was there inadequacy in terms of intelligence or in terms of equipment. But let me go to General Mohanty about what were the Pakistani intentions in launching this operation. General Mohanty, over to you.
Nitin, like you brought out, his main aim was to actually cut off Siachen. And the main route to supply Siachen, in fact, Leh is the Jojila Road, Jojila to Leh. That's the main access. Though, of course, there is another access available on the Leh-Manali highway, but that was not that was sparingly used and doesn't have the kind of capacity that this main NH1 had. So his main intention was they cut this off, this road, and take revenge against the Operation Meghdut, which is the Siachen operation that the Indian Army had launched. But coming back to Shivani, your question, it is this plan was in the making as far as General Musharraf is concerned and his predecessors are concerned for some time. They wanted to put this into effect at some time, and like PM Nawaz Sharif had mentioned, that he was not even aware that this operation was being planned and was launched by Musharraf, and very few generals of Musharraf's army, in fact, was also in knowledge of the operation till it finally actually took shape. So therefore, as far as the Lahore bus diplomacy is concerned, the Lahore thing is concerned,
Declaration is concerned, yeah.
Is concerned. I mean, the chief of army staff, General Musharraf, had not kept the prime minister aware about this operation being launched by him. And the events which happened after that is for everybody to see. Second
True.
is,
in fact, there's a total disconnect between the army and the
and the second is that what happens is that in summers most of the troops are actually pulled out to fight the insurgency in the valley. So that's the time when the intensity of counterinsurgency operations in the valley actually increases. So therefore, troops are pulled out from certain low threat areas to fight insurgency in the valley, and therefore there were gaps in this area, and it was the most suitable time for Pakis to take advantage of the gaps in defenses, loss of the intelligence not being there, a wide a frontage of roughly 160 kilometers being held by just a brigade, which I mentioned earlier. So those were the advantages that the Pakistan Army wanted to take, and therefore they put this into picture. And in any case, Pakistan Army is never in favor of peaceful resolution between India and Pakistan, and they generally try to sabotage the advances that the both nations make to reach some kind of resolution to the disputes.
True, you've put it very well. Before I go to the next question, one clarification or one assurance I think you need to give to the viewers that since then the security and the deployment of the Indian Army in that area, Kargil, Drass, Batalik, has increased manifold. I think one full division now looks after that, 8 Div Forever in Operation divisions. So that's the kind of precaution India has now taken, right, after so many years, or immediately after the Kargil conflict itself.
Yes, that is right. I don't want to give the exact figures, but definitely there are about 3 to 4 times of 3 to 4 times of
Yes.
troops that are currently deployed in that area, consequent to this the Kargil operations. We have been able to plug those gaps. Only thing is that Nitin, the resources that we had with us at that point in time, those are the reserves which was deployed there to plug those gaps. The division under which my brigade came, 56 Mountain Brigade, was incidentally a reserve brigade, which was based for launching offensive operations. And that brigade division got sucked into holding these defenses. But that's a normal process, Nitin. I mean, for the viewers also. And you always create and recreate reserves depending on the threat perceptions in various sectors. So while this division got deployed there, now it's holding the entire frontage. We have other resources in terms of pulling back and then creating reserves for employment elsewhere. So that's a normal process which goes on.
So now we are adequately secured there. That's the assurance I wanted from you as a somebody who watches that, and he was participant in the Kargil conflict itself. Let me go to the final question. We have Prerna joining us from New Delhi, and Prerna, go ahead with your question. Give your brief introduction, and then ask the question.
Hi, sir. Can you hear me? Hi,
Yes,
I'm
I can hear
Prerna.
you.
I'm from Delhi. I've done my bachelor's in journalism from Pearl. So my question was, how do soldiers and the officers keep their motivations up, like during such dire situations? So I just wanted to know that. How do everyone like cope up?
Right. It's a very large philosophical question, but before General Mohanty has the final word, let me just say this, having interacted with the Indian military and particularly with the Indian Army. The Indian Army's own systems of motivation, inspiration to the soldiers is time-tested and well-proven. The soldier fights for what is called Naam Namak Nishan. The battalion Naam is his own, reputation, his unit's reputation. Namak is, of course, the loyalty to the country and the flag, and the flag is the Nishan, basically. That is one. And secondly, the relationship between the officers and soldiers is so kind of close and very warm that soldiers are willing to be led by officers into dire situations or situations of life and death. But let me turn to somebody like General Mohanty, who's lived all his life in the army and led so many soldiers, troops in different situations, and give us what he feels is the strength of the Indian Army.
Nitin, I will just give you 2 examples. I mean, these are live examples from Drass, and that will bring out the issue of how motivated our soldiers and our officers are. The first one is Major Rajesh Adhikari, when we started engaging the forward slopes of Tololing, we wanted to utilize the Mi-17 aircrafts retrofitted with rockets to fire on those features. And initially, when these aircrafts had come, we had to indicate those targets, indicate those features where the enemy positions were to the Air Force to be able to engage them. So Rajesh Adhikari was the one who was deputed by his unit because he was in contact with the enemy. So he was brought to the brigade headquarters. I briefed him, and then he went to the Air Force. I told him, "You please go with the choppers and indicate the targets to the Air Force, the Mi-17 aircrafts, to engage targets." So he told me, "Sir, why are you sending me? Please send somebody else because my unit is launching operations. I want to be part of that unit, sir. I don't want to be there in the aircraft showing targets to the Air Force." I said, "Fine, at least for the first day, you go and show the targets to them." So he went on the first day. And on the second day, he came and pleaded to me, "Sir, please don't send me. And since the targets have been seen by the Air Force, they'll be able to engage those tolling feature." And then I told the Air Force, "Now, since you have seen the targets, please do it without indicator being provided by us in the form of an officer, because it's very crucial to launching operation by the unit." The officer went back to his, unit for launching operations along with his battalion. That's the kind of motivation of that officer. And it
And
so
he
happened-
sacrificed his life.
And he
and
sacrificed.
after,
Yes.
after 2 days, when the actual operation was launched, the offensive was launched by his unit, the officers lost his life. And I can't never forget those days. And his body kept on lying in those in that depression till the final operation launched to capture Tololing. And after that, only the body could be recovered. And that was the kind of
True.
motivation. And it so happened
Absolutely.
that out of these 4 aircrafts which went subsequently for engaging the same tolling feature, one of those B-17 aircraft got shot down by a Stinger missile. So
Right.
those are the
Right.
kind of motivation. I will bring out also, if you have the time, Nitin, about
Yes. Please go.
the motivation, the
Go ahead.
motivation of the men that we had. We required large number of missiles. To be able to engage the enemy from the positions where the infantry was holding. Infantry at that point in time was not holding too many missiles. There are just about 8 odd missiles held by every battalion. So we got these missile launchers from the mechanized infantry battalions deployed all over the country. I mean, some of them were as far down as Southern Command. And when these detachments came to me, they came from different units. I was briefing them. I said that since we are launching operations at the height of about more than 14,000, 15,000 meters, you require a certain amount of acclimatization for these people to go and deploy themselves in those units. When I was briefing them, I told them, "Sorry, I can't give you 7 days, 8 days of acclimatization. And I can give you just about 3, 4 days, get your breaths back, and then you are off to your units where you'll get deployed." Each one of them, they said, "Sir, we have not come here for acclimatization. Please send us right away." They send us,
Right.
"Please send us right away. We are not here for acclimatization. We will go and die there, or we kill the enemy." This is the words they told me, Nitin. I can never, ever forget.
True. No, you're absolutely right. The kind of motive. And that won us the Kargil war, actually. Young officers and the men, hardy men who don't bother about their lives. They just want to engage the enemy and emerge victorious. I completely agree with you, having lived there during those days and seen and interacted with all of them, even subsequently and before that. But Kargil was something else because, like you said, those of us who know how much acclimatization means for fighting in the mountains, and if they said this kind of remarks that they made to you, shows the kind of high level of motivation that is there in the Indian Army amongst the men as well as the officers. I think we can go on and on talking about the Kargil stories, but let us remember with respect and with memory and remember the good times and also their sacrifices and their bravery that the men and officers actually showed in Kargil, and people like you who were in the operations who got us the victory 23 years ago. Kargil was a turning point in the subcontinent's history. And every year we do, of course, recap and recall the entire operation and what went wrong, what could have been, and what actually turned out to be right for India in terms of the victory that India achieved. And it's, of course, the first televised war in living memory in India. It came to the drawing rooms of the country, of the common people. And therefore, Kargil has a certain resonance, and we thought just before the Kargil Vijay Diwas on 26 July, we'll have this. We are privileged to have you on board this time, now that you have hung up your uniform, your boots. But your contribution will forever be remembered, like all others who were part of that Kargil operation. Thank you very much, viewers, all the three people who asked the questions, and thank you very much, General Mohanty, for sparing your time from all the way from Itanagar. That is the program on Kargil. You are on Ask Nitin, the new weekly feature that we have launched. We will have similar topics where you can interact, we can engage with me, Nitin Gokhale. But you know where to reach us on StratNews Global, where to reach me. And also, of course, keep giving us your feedback, your questions and your comments, which keeps us motivated, like the Indian Army was motivated in Kargil, and of course gives us more ideas. Until the next time, it's goodbye.